Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we begin our study of the first book of Kings, that is Melachim Aleph. We are studying chapter 14. We just completed the study of chapter 13, and we ended it with the discussion that Jereboam did not learn his lesson from the visit of the prophet of God, did not learn his lesson, did not change his ways, and set the people on the path of sin, which would ultimately lead to the destruction of Jereboam and Jereboam's family and his very short-lived monarchy, what was to become a very short-lived monarchy. Ba'isa, he at that time, when he showed that he was unwilling to learn his lesson and change paths, Chola Aviyah ben Jereboam, Aviyah, the son of Jereboam, fell ill. Vayomer Jereboam leishto, and Jereboam said to his wife, Kumi navi hishtanit, get up and disguise yourself. V'lo yedu'u ki at eshet Jereboam, so that when you go out and travel, people will not know that you are the queen, that you are the wife of the king Jereboam. V'holachta Shiloh, and I want you to go to Shiloh, which is the hometown, because Hine Sham Achia Hanavi, Achia Hashiloni, Achia from Shiloh, the prophet, lives there. Who diber alai, he is the one who spoke about me and prophesied regarding me, Lemelech al Am Hazeh, that I was going to be the king over this nation. So the prophet is still there. Go to the prophet. Of course, because our son is ill. When Jereboam asks his wife to disguise herself, it reminds us of other episodes of people disguising themselves in order to get some kind of good word, some kind of blessing from a prophet. The first example that comes to mind, of course, is how Jacob dressed up as his brother Esau, so that Isaac would not recognize him and he would get the blessings. The difference between there and here, of course, is that according to the biblical narrative, Jacob actually was dressing up in order to obtain something that he deserved himself. So he tricked Yitzchak in order to get something that he deserved. Whereas over here, Jereboam thinks he can have his wife dress up and get some kind of message, some kind of prophecy, some kind of prayer for his son. Because he knows that if it's known that he or his wife are representing themselves in front of the prophet, they're going to get criticized. And the other episode that this brings up is a similar episode where King Saul dressed up in order to visit the necromancer, in order to revive Shmuel, to revive Samuel, in order to get Shmuel's blessing to win in his battle, which ultimately became the final battle of Saul's life. When we studied in the book of Shmuel the life and monarchy of King Saul, of Shaul HaMelech, we pointed out that Shaul had a consistent mistake that he consistently made, one which did not continue with the one who succeeded him, King David, and that was that Shaul kept on making the mistake of thinking that with a ritual or a sacrifice that he can somehow affect God's behavior towards him, affect God's judgment towards him by doing something, by, for example, bringing the Aron, bringing the ark, or saying a prayer, or bringing sacrifices. And Shmuel kept on emphasizing to Shaul that it's your behavior that you need to change. Here, this is Jereboam's key mistake again. By thinking that by dressing yourself up, you can somehow get a blessing, which is somehow going to make things better, means that you think that the blessing is some sort of a magical potion that you get from the prophet, and then poof, things are better. And if we can sneak and get it, that would be even better. The point, though, that Jereboam missed is that his behavior needs to change. How he acts needs to change. And that is the key message that is consistent throughout Tanakh. The key message that was consistent throughout all of the prophets is that God doesn't react to magical potions or incantations or blessings. Rather, God reacts to your behavior. If you improve, if you be a better person, if you repent for your ways, if you stop the evil that you're doing, then you will get the benefit of God's favor. So here Yeravam is making that key mistake, and we see him making the key mistake that Shaul made as well. And just as Shaul's kingdom did not last, so too Yeravam will not last, as we shall see. We're in verse 3 now. I want you to take gifts to the prophet. Take 10 loaves of bread, v'nikudim, and some kind of cracker or a cookie, bakbuk devash, and a bottle full of honey. Ubase love, and come to him. Hu yagid lach ma'yeh lanar. He will tell you what will happen to the child. And this is a reference. It's a way of saying he will give you a blessing that the child will be better. In other words, if you bring him these gifts and you pretend that you're just an ordinary woman asking for her son who is ill, then he'll give you the blessings and prayers that are needed for the child to get better. Vataz kein eshet Yeravam. So the wife of Yeravam did as she was requested. Vatelech Shiloh, and she went and traveled to Shiloh. Vatovo beit Achia, and she came to the house of Achia. Va'achiyahu lo yachol lirot. Achiyahu was unable to see. Ki kamu einav misevo, because his eyes had stopped working because of his age. Again, this reminds us of the story of Yitzchak, of Isaac, who was unable to see. It's interesting here that we don't hear any word from Yeravam's wife. We find out what she did, but we will not hear at all what her thoughts were, what her feelings were, what she said. Did she say anything? Did she do anything? Something to think about when we think about this chapter. However, although Achiyahu was blind in his eyes, he was not blind in his heart and in his soul, and he understood in his wisdom what was going on. And how did he understand? Because Achiyahu was faithful to God. So Adonai Amar al Achiyahu, and Achiyahu's prophetic abilities and his ability to understand God's ways, God communicated to him, Hinei Eshet Yeravam Ba'ah, the wife of Yeravam is coming, Lidrosh Davar Meimcha, to ask of something from you. This is just it demonstrates that when it said before, find out what will be, it wasn't just meaning find out what will be, but it's just a way of saying ask him for a prayer. She wants something from you regarding her son, Kicholahu, because he is ill, and you should answer such and such. Kazov v'chazet daber ilah. This and this and this. This should be the answer that you give her. And it was when she did arrive, as God had told Achia the prophet, v'himit nakera, and she. And it will be that when she comes, I'm sorry, these are still the words of God, to Achia, she will be disguised. Vayhi kishma Achiyahu, when Achiyahu heard at Kol Ragleha, the sound of her footsteps, Ba'a Pesach, coming through the doorway. Vayomer Boi Eshet Yeravam, come, wife of Yeravam. Lama zat mitnakera, why are you trying to disguise yourself? V'yanochi shaluach elayach kasha, I have a very bad message for you. So don't even bother asking, because before you even open your mouth, I already have your answer, and it's an answer that you're not going to like. Verse 7, L'chi imri Yeravam, go and say to Yeravam, your husband, Ko amar Adonai Yisrael, so says, this is the message that God, the Lord of Israel, has for you. Ya'an asher harimoticha mitoch ha'am, because I have raised you from the nation, Va'etencha nagid al am Yisrael, and I made you a ruler over my nation Israel. Remember, I made that. I gave you this kingdom, and then you go and you use that against me. Lots of people in Israel and in the entire world that day were sinners and worshipers of idols, etc. But you have a special responsibility because I made you the leader. You were supposed to lead the people back to God. You were the defender of the common folk against the tyranny of your Rechavam. And you could have taken that. You could have made a just and kind nation and worshiped God, and eventually, bring the people back. There would have been two kingdoms, each worshiping the same God, and eventually bringing them back together to me. But instead, what did you do? You acted terribly. Therefore, and also, what did I do? I tore the kingdom away. I tore most of the people of Israel. I tore them away from the house of David. The 10 tribes, the vast majority of the people left the kingdom, which was the house of David, my beloved David. And I gave them, and I gave those to you. But what did you do? You didn't act like my servant David did. Asher shamar mitzvotai, that he kept my mitzvot. The key thing here is What did David do? Asher Shamar, he kept mitzvotai, my commandments. Vasher holach, he went, he acted, he lived acharai, after in my ways. B'chol levavo, with all of his heart. La'asot, to do, to act. Rak hayashar be'enai, only that which was righteous in my eyes, that which was straight in my eyes. And God emphasizes repeatedly, it was action that I desired from David, and it was action that David gave me. David did, he lived, he acted in the way. His heart was faithful to me, and therefore he lived in the way I wanted him to live. But Torah lasot, but what did you do? You did evil. Mikol asher hayu lefanecha. The issue here is not what you think, what you believe, how you trick, how you act. I mean, I'm sorry. When I say it, act the second time, I meant act in a devious way, how you cover up who you really are, right? You did so bad. You did worse than everyone that came before you. But you pulled the people away from God. But you didn't even allow them to travel to Jerusalem to worship God. Instead, you went and you made a whole new religion. You made foreign gods, umasechot, and foreign images that were molten images, lachiseni, in order to make me angry. That was the end result. And you threw me behind your back. This image that God says, this is what you did to me. Therefore, I am going to bring evil, bad, terrible disaster upon the house of your Jeroboam, of your Avam, your Avam Ashtin Bakir. I am going, the sound of anger, the sound of this vehement, incredibly strong and powerful anger and disgust is going to be reflected in this verse tremendously. I am going to cut off for Yeravam everyone. Mashtin Bakir means every male in a very crude way. Mashtin Bakir means those who urinate against the walls, a reference to males. I'm going to kill them all. But in not just saying every man, but saying it in a way that it's just very crude and just disgusted with you. Atzur v'azuv Israel. I'm going to cut off everyone who is atzur and azuv among the people of Israel. What does that mean? Atzur generally means those who are bound to others, meaning servants. The azuv, and those that are abandoned to themselves, meaning they're free men. But it's a kind of a language that's it's a very strong language. It's not a very elegant or eloquent way of saying this. It's just a way of saying everybody, every single one, whether you're a master or a slave, you're gone. I am going to get rid of and clear out or sweep out everyone from the house of Jeroboam, kasher yivaer hagalola tumo, just as one sweeps dung and fecal matter away until he's gone and completely gone. The language of disgust is so powerful. Hamet liYeravam ba'ir, those for Yeravam's family that die in the city, yochlu haklavim, will be eaten by the stray dogs. V'hames pasodeh, and those that die in the fields, yochlu of hashemayim, will be eaten by the vultures of the sky. Ki Adonai diber, because it is God who has spoken this. V'at, and you. So now Achia addresses the Yeravam's wife. Kumi lechi leveisech, go home. The moment you arrive at home in town, your child shall die. The child will die. However, I will tell you that this son, Avia, will die, and everyone will eulogize him, not like I described the other descendants are going to have the terrible, terrible end that was just described, but he will die an honorable death. The people will eulogize him, v'kafruoso, and they will bury him in an honorable burial, kizel vado, because he alone, this Avia alone, Yavoli Yeravam el kaver. He's the only one of Yeravam's descendants that will be buried in a normal grave. Ya'anim tzavo davar tov, because there's something good about him. Exactly what that is isn't specified in the rabbinic tradition. It is said that he allowed people to go to Jerusalem to travel despite his father's orders. But regardless, it's not specified in the verse. But there's something good about him. He deserved at least an honorable death. Regarding God, the Lord of Israel, in the house of Yeravam. So even though he lived in the house of Yeravam, there was something good about this young man that he deserved at least that kind of respect, unlike the other descendants who are going to be literally disposed of in the horrific way that was described before. Ve'ekim Adonai lo melech al Yisrael. And God will raise another king over the people of Israel, Asher Yachrit et Beit Yeravam, Zayom, that they will destroy the house of Yeravam today, Umeh Gam Ata. And this will happen even now. In other words, it's going to happen soon. V'hika Adonai et Yisrael, and God will strike the people of Israel, Ka'asher Yonud HaKoneh B'mayim. In the same way a rush of water pushes reeds over, God is going to push the people over. V'notash es Yisrael me'al Adamah HaTovah Hazot. And God will eventually, and this is clearly a reference to it, of the eventual, and the people of Israel will be taken away from this beautiful land, this good land, Asher Nasan Lavotehem, that God has given to their forefathers, Vizeiram Me'ever LaNahar, and God will scatter the people around beyond the river Euphrates. Because they made these idols, these Asherah, which is some kind of a idol represented by trees that angered God. And He will give away the people of Israel because of the terrible sins of Yeravam that he has sinned, and that he has brought the people of Israel to sin. That ends this very powerfully strong and angry message. So the wife of Yeravam got up, and she went, and she arrived in the city of Tirza. As soon as she stepped across the threshold of the house, Hanar mate, and the boy died. And they buried him. And the people of Israel eulogized him. Kidvar Adonai Asher Diber, as the word of God which he had spoken, Bi'ad Avdo Achio Hanavi, to his servant Achiyahu the prophet. And then, in an interesting manner, the verse, because Yeravam, the only thing that the book of Kings is interested in, it's interested in the history, but only the history that's necessary to relate the story. And the basic story is, if you're faithful to God and you live right, you'll be all right. And if you're not, you won't. That's the bottom line, right? It's very oversimplified, obviously. So we have to read together and study together in order to get the message. But all the other details about Yeravam's wars and battles and whatever else he did with his kingdom, whatever accomplishments and achievements or lack thereof he had, everything else that happened with Yeravam, Asher Nilcham, those wars that he fought, Asher Malach, and that he was the king. In other words, those other kingly things that he achieved, they're all written down in the history book, in the book of Chronicles, that recites and tells you the stories that happened during the days of the kings of Israel. Kings of Israel as opposed to the kings of Judah. And how long did Yeravam, how long was he king? Esrim Shana, for 22 years. He passed on and laid with his fathers. And Nadav, his son, became king after him. This ends the life and career, the very tragic and terrible life and career of Yeravam, who set the people off on a terrible, terrible path of destruction, which we are going to be reading about throughout this book of Kings. Now his son Nadav is king. And the next half of the chapter, which we'll study in the next podcast, the Navi focuses on Rechavam, goes to the south, and in a pattern that we're going to find, now that there's two kingdoms throughout the book of Kings, it flips back and forth from the kings of Israel to the kings of Judah, to the kings of Israel to the kings of Judah. We're going to be flipping back and forth. Thank you so much for studying chapter 14, part A together with me. Looking forward to studying the rest of this chapter, the rest of this book together. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.